Hello everyone, I'm Shazib Usman and welcome you to our conversation. Today we will be discussing education system in Pakistan, a perspective from law, policy and economics. We are very happy to have Mr. Raja Rafiullah. Mr. Raja Rafiullah is a researcher and development practitioner who specializes in applied economic policy. He holds a master's degree from Cornell University, where he majored in economic and financial policy. He has worked extensively within both research and development sector domains and has cross cutting research interests. His recent work include researching Pakistan's labor market, the former retail sector, and state owned enterprises. Rafi is a regular contributor to English newspaper publications in Pakistan and has been published by the Cornell Policy Review. He has also worked extensively in education policy, for which we have invited him today. Thank you, Rafi, for your time. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Shadip. Thank you for having me.
Are you enjoying our office today?
I'm loving it. The office looks really nice. I like the setup and so
Thank
forth. So,
thank you so much for coming to our office and taking time from your schedule. So, Rafi, my first question is very simple, and I think a lot of people have, asked you, why are there so many children out of school? Like, if you go to any road in Pakistan, you see children begging. You go to any house in Pakistan, you see children working. Why is it so? It is simply dehumanizing. A lot of people simply are very worried about it. So, why are so many children out of school?
yeah, so I think it's very important to address this question. And there's no doubt out of school children in Pakistan is a big issue. And the numbers have been there for the longest time, and they have been publicized in both regional, local, and also international media. Pakistan is one of the top countries when it comes to having out of school children.
Mm,
So the current figure, according to the latest, this is government data, according to Pakistan Education Statistics Report, is around 26 million
mm,
children are out of school in Pakistan.
mm,
So yeah, it's a big problem. But I would say um, there are many driving factors. Coming to your question, what causes this? There are इसकी काफी वजूहात हैं. One of the main things I think is social factors, cultural factors, but there is also partly certain parts of Pakistan the issues. There is the issue of lack of infrastructure, lack of resources, lack of institutional support on the ground. But those factors I think have been mitigated for uh, on the whole the past few years.
mm.
So, but there are other factors, social and cultural factors that are contributing. So, it's a very, very interesting topic, a very broad topic. But having said that, I still feel that we are approaching the problem probably at a technical level when it comes to counting these people. Because I think first you have to realize how many people are out. आई गेट दैट आपको एक फिगर मिल जाएगा कि इतने बच्चे आउट ऑफ स्कूल हैं पाकिस्तान के अंदर ये दुनिया में थर्ड नंबर के ऊपर हम आ जाते हैं and so forth. But you also have to realize our calculations जो हम कर रहे हैं इतने बच्चे अगर आउट ऑफ स्कूल हैं 26 मिलियन का फिगर बहुत बड़ा फिगर होता है और आप उसकी परसेंटेज टर्म्स में निकाल लें actually the percentage has gone down in the past few years. पहले percentage जो होती थी 16-17 के अंदर it used to be 44% of, now it's 39%. But total number of children has gone up because of obviously population has increased. But there are issues with the how we calculate them too. I can go into technical details regarding that, but yes, I will agree with you. Out of school children is an issue, but I would say, in a nutshell, to answer your question specifically, its issue is not mostly with infrastructure, provision of infrastructure and facilities. There are other issues which are social, economic, and cultural.
Hmm. Very interesting. And I know you have worked for a lot of IFIs and you have a lot of experience in donor-driven infrastructure and research. So, how do you view the role of infrastructure, both material and human, in reducing illiteracy in Pakistan? Do you think that infrastructure has a role? Because as you're saying, it has less to do with the problem. It is more cultural, economic. But is there any relation of infrastructure also with the lack of education in Pakistan for children?
Yeah, most definitely. I think infrastructure is an issue, particularly in rural areas and particularly in certain provinces. So Balochistan, for instance, by far is the most deprived province when it
Hmm.
comes to in terms of infrastructure
Hmm.
and provision of what we call basic facilities.
Yeah.
What are basic facilities in school? Um, whether there is a functional washroom there,
Hmm.
whether they have safe drinking water there,
Hmm.
whether there is a boundary wall, because boundary wall is important in case
Yeah.
children should have a sense of security or not. So these things are basic facilities, we call them, whether there is electricity in the school or not. So there are, for instance, most of the schools in Punjab, public schools in
Hmm.
Punjab,
Hmm.
this has been taken care of.
Hmm.
And to the extent Sindh में भी और KPK में भी इतना बड़ा issue नहीं है.
Hmm.
But Balochistan is a big issue in terms of basic infrastructure. So I wouldn't say कि totally it's been taken care of. There are certain sections in parts of Pakistan जहाँ पे ये बहुत persisting issues है अभी भी. So there is a direct link उसमें भी. और whether एक counting के और भी चीज़ें होती हैं in a technical point of view you have to see. When you say कि how often these things break down, we don't have indicators for that. We know, yeah, it has electricity provision is there, but अगर बहुत frequent load shedding हो रही है, so that also discourages people and children from not going to school. So those figures are not there. There could be provision of electricity, but if there is no electricity for 10 hours during the regular lesson time, so that is also an issue. So we don't have nice, reliable data for that.
Hmm. So you're saying that it's not only like if we create a school, that's not only an issue. We have to have the right environment, both national, right? Like we have to have the electricity, we have to have the cultural, economic, political environment, so that if we are working on education, that complements the overall infrastructure. That's what you're saying.
Yes, I think there are two facets to the environment too. I think we can go into the other very important facet too because I think Nazi is ignored in Pakistan. Uh, one is to talk about the first one, having so many out of school children and not having basic provision of facilities in certain sections of Pakistan. For most, it's been taken care of, but at least at a very basic level, it's been taken care of. That matters a lot in terms of physical infrastructure and physical facilities. But then you also have to look at how you create a learning environment for students. How many teachers are there in the school? What's the quality of those teachers? And what's your student to teacher ratio?
Yeah.
All these things, what your teacher to school ratios. These things also contribute to a learning environment, and those are really important to discuss too, particularly when it comes to increasing learning outcomes of students.
So do you think that it has an impact on like retention and survival rate? Because we have seen that in the primary education, a lot of children enroll, but they don't go to the middle, and from the middle they go and go to the high. And we are seeing very low retention and survival rate. So what do you think about that? What are the factors that are causing it?
I think again, before I go into what are the factors that are causing it, it's partly for the audience to know. According to the last Pakistan Education Statistics report, and these are just figures for public schools, 77%, only 77% of students who enter grade 1, they enroll in grade 5. So this is just primary education. So you're saying 77 to 23% dropout. पहली hurdle के ऊपर 23% dropout. And then effective transition rate from middle to high, middle to secondary, and then secondary to higher forms of education. उसमें भी issues हैं. So that needs to be really addressed too. But उसमें काफ़ी जो है ना एक contributing factor आ जाते हैं, which are again I would say are social and economic reasons. And economic reasons ये आ जाते हैं कि 5वीं के बाद जो है आपने और एक also infrastructure के reasons भी हैं, जैसे कि primary schools most जगह के ऊपर होते हैं. Mostly even like remote areas with a primary school. But now you're going to go to a middle and उसके ऊपर secondary school के ऊपर आपने जाना है. तो people will have to go farther away from their homes. Right? And particularly then it's an issue for girls. अगर उन्होंने जो है अपने गांव से उठ के 2 गांव दूर जाना है तो it's an issue. Safety का issue है, transport का issue है. तो that also contributes to a lot of people, children dropping out across levels, because primary school तो आपको अपनी ही जो है मोजे के अंदर गाँव के अंदर मिल जाएगा, लेकिन आपने जब मिडिल में जाना है और फिर ऊपर आपने सेकेंडरी में जाना है, तो वहाँ पे स्कूल्स कम हो जाते हैं और फिर डिस्टेंस कम्यूट बढ़ जाती है। तो उसमें भी एक इनोवेटिव स्ट्रैटेजीज जो की जा सकती है और कुछ किया भी गया है। सम टेस्ट्स हैव बीन डन how to convert primary schools into double shift schools and so forth. So those are things that can be explored further on how to address this problem, and I'm pretty sure that will somewhat also help us in at least increasing the survival rates.
So you're saying that again, as you're saying, there should be a right environment
Mhm.
for access to education. Like,
Mhm.
it comes down to all the issues, including like access to school in terms of distance. So basically, you're saying that.
Yeah. So access to school is very important.
Hmm.
Particularly, you see, you, for a country in which we have, to be honest, we have security issues, uh, particularly when it comes to women, right? So it's important. लोग थोड़े हेजिटेंट होते हैं कि यार अपनी बेटी को आपने जो है इतने दिन कहाँ पे भेजना है, उसके लिए किसी को एक ड्यूटी लगानी पड़ती है कि तुम्हें उसको छोड़ के जाना है, तुम्हें उसको लेना है, ये कर। एंड देन मोस्टली पीपल नहीं उसको करते, कहते हैं हाँ चलो ठीक है। अर्बन एरियाज के अंदर तो हम सोचते हैं ना कि यार घर के सामने स्कूल है तो हम भेज देंगे, बट यू हैव टू थिंक कि पाकिस्तान में कितने जो है रूरल एरियाज हैं, सो दैट इज ऑल्सो रियली इम्पोर्टेंट।
Perfect. And this makes me go to my next question, which is more about, I would say, the right environment again, and in terms of law.
Hmm.
So, how do you think that domestic lawmakers,
Hmm.
international law, domestic law, helps in access to education? Well, as a lawyer, I can tell you that in international law, international human rights law, education is considered a core right, a right that gives access to other rights.
Hmm.
So, if you have education, you have the right to work because you are, enabled to work. And if you have education, then you can access other political rights
Yeah.
and civic rights. So, and then after that international human rights covenant, we have also our own local statutes. We have this right to education and right to compulsory education act in all provinces. Especially after we have this constitutional amendment which made education a fundamental right. So laws are present. I would say the laws are present which might not be justiciable probably in a very, let's say, after I think fundamental rights provision in the constitution, it is even justiciable, so you can go to the court and then access it too. But do you think that the law in that sense is in any way playing a positive role in access to education?
So I think you are in the better probably position to answer that, but I'll give it my best go. Like you said, it's enshrined in our constitution now, and internationally speaking too, there is stress on that. But there's one thing having it on within constitutions and within declarations of human rights,
Yeah.
but there's another thing totally when it comes to enforceability and also making sure that this happens on the ground. So, and I think this is not only relevant to education, this is relevant to all facets of human endeavor. So you can have laws that, so it's important. I think it's really important to have that written down, that this is a right and nobody can take this right away from you. That's a good starting point. But
Yeah.
one has to go forward from there.
Hmm.
But then we have to realize what kind of education are we saying is a basic human right. That is also the case. Is it basic education? And what is basic education? So maybe मैं ये कहूँगा यार मैं मदरसे में हर किसी बच्चे को भेज दूँ वही basic education. That's it. पहली क्लास पढ़ लें. That's basic education. Then you have to define to what is a basic right that. या फिर आपने कहना है at a very let's say कि एक बहुत ही कोई hyper specialized society आ जाती है, उसमें कहते हैं कि नहीं हमें क्या, we want everybody to have bachelor's degrees minimum, right? That is like the basic right everybody should have. And let's go ahead and make a university in every district in Pakistan. हमें डीजा वर्क की थोड़ी फीलिंग आ रही है कि maybe we have already tried something like that.
Yeah.
So उसमें जो है you have to think about it कि what is the basic right you're talking about. And then maybe have a very low hanging fruit and try to first fulfill it for everybody. But the first step is to bring those a significant amount of children into school and keep them in school. Not only bring them to school, but also keep them in school. So That is really important. And then the main thing is, I think इसका क्या फायदा है? बच्चों को स्कूल में लेके इसलिए आना है कि बच्चों को स्कूल में लेके आना है, या फिर बच्चों को स्कूल में लेके आना है कि कुछ वो सीखे भी. So that is also a bigger debate. What's the quality of education in Pakistan? But we are really hamstrung here because we have to choose. In economics 101, we have what's called constrained optimization. We have to choose, we have limited resources and we have options of goods. We have to choose the best combination of two things. Right now, we have to choose between good quality of education, improving the quality of education, उसमें भी resources लगेंगे. We have to come with innovative strategies, teachers को कैसे train करना है, curriculum कैसा revise करना है, बच्चों की training कैसे करनी है, all of those things. और उसके बाद bringing those children into school. ठीक है, quantity of को भी change करना है ना, quantity of children in school, quantity of teachers. तो quantity और quality दो choices हैं हमारे पास, and we have limited resources. यानी कि कोई गवर्नमेंट के पास अनलिमिटेड पैसे नहीं है ना, कि इतने पैसे हैं हमारे पास, इतना एजुकेशन बजट होता है. उसमें से आप देखें एजुकेशन बजट में कितना ज़्यादा जो है बजट हमारा चला जाता है सिर्फ पेइंग द सैलरीज. सैलरीज भी देनी होती हैं, आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट, बट डेवलपमेंट बजट कितना है हमारा, जिसके अंदर वी कम अप विद न्यू स्ट्रैटेजीज टू इम्प्रूव बोथ क्वांटिटी एंड क्वालिटी. सो द कंस्ट्रेंट ऑप्टिमाइजेशन इज मुझे लगता है सबसे मोस्ट डिफिकल्ट चॉइस है. अगर हम क्वालिटी को ऊपर जाते हैं और उसके अंदर हम रिसोर्सेज दे रहे हैं बाय डिफॉल्ट, हम एक सर्टन, एंड ये बहुत बड़ी बात मैं करने लगा यहाँ पे, बाय डिफॉल्ट इफ वी गो टुवर्ड्स quality of education and investing resources in that, which we are doing in certain extent, to a certain extent, we are by default, given the fact that we are limited resources, saying to a number of students, in children in Pakistan, we're okay with the fact that you're out of school, because there is a trade-off. And that is very problematic, particularly when you bring in what you were talking about, the fundamental right to education. And states' responsibility is there. But if states' prioritization of where to spend resources is not aligned with that, so there are issues there. So I think that's the biggest high-level question. Are we, if we want to increase quality and invest on that, are we saying, and this is the question I'm asking, aren't we by default saying to a section of children in Pakistan, we're okay with you being out of school, we will rather increase the quality of education for your other comrades who are in school?
Well, I think that is definitely interesting, and I think that is something which we have seen, I think, almost everywhere in the world. This quality versus quantity debate, like for giving high quality things to few rather than giving low quality things to everyone. I think that is a very long debate even between socialism and capitalism.
Yes.
And I do agree with you. I think it's a very interesting topic in that sense. And but I think that about law, law is something which I would say requires you to have an access in the first place. So if you don't have a justiciable right, other rights comes after that. Maybe it's on the paper, maybe it's not justiciable as much. We have seen very less jurisprudence on it, but it is still needs to be there as a first step, and then other things follow. So I would say that law is important. Law does make an enabling environment, as we were saying, but I would also say that just having law is not simply enough. A lot of, I think, donor-driven projects just focus on policy and law, and they think, okay, we have made that law, but nothing really happens on the ground. So I do agree with both of your points, and it's very interesting.
But I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Very quick question,
Yeah,
because since I wanted an opinion of somebody who was an expert in law on this. I remember reading back in the day a piece by a very good economist and also a philosopher. Not a philosopher, I say a student of economic philosophy with काफी काम है उनका, Matasan. And he had this paper on this certain. He was talking about, this is the context he's talking about, famine, and I think that there are certain unalienable rights that you can't take away from anybody. So right not to die of hunger is one of those rights. But right, so is education a similar right like that? Are we, because then we have to define what are those rights that are need to be really innate and everything flows from there. If you're treating education like that, then we have to really uh, be sure that we're taking it seriously. Because
I
people should not die hungry, but is it okay कि अगर कोई स्कूल नहीं जाता वो कुछ और कर लेता?
I think the international human rights law in our
Yeah.
constitution of Pakistan, there is no such thing as hierarchy of rights, in my opinion. And I was saying that there's a concept in international human rights law which is called indivisibility of human rights.
Mm.
And as I was saying initially, that it's a core right. Education is a core right that gives access to right
Mm.
to work.
Mm.
And then inherently that gives access to right to food, as you were saying.
Yeah.
So everything is interrelated. International human rights law. Amartya Sen, I think I read that piece you're talking about. I remember that a little, and I agree with it in a philosophical way. He was
Yeah.
saying it, but in a human rights law, in international
Mm.
law, there is no such thing as hierarchy of right.
Yeah.
Because this is superior right.
Mm.
There's fundamental rights, and education is a fundamental right. So is right to food.
Mm.
Um, some rights are culturally relative, they
Mm.
might come after that, but in relation to these two, they are
Mm.
fundamental rights,
Mm.
at least in our constitution and in the international human rights law too. They are part of the basic two bill of rights.
Okay.
So I will answer that in that aspect. um, but I think you have created this very interesting debate that I always think about, that if we think about how the modern education system has evolved, we have both studied at LUMS. Most of our class fellows have gone into working for big multinational corporations outside Pakistan.
Mm.
Or if not, then maybe being part of this development sector or whatever. Uh, do you think, and it's apparently LUMS education is the
Yeah, and
best in,
but now some of them are coming back after a midlife crisis. But at least in my case, because when I went to labs, there was a while back. You are quite recent.
you are going again. The point is that, do you think that education system, the modern education system, we all say, okay, we all need to give access to school and all that, but what are we producing? People who were given scholarships, people who did not come from, very a highly economic background, they were given scholarships, and what happened? They become also part of the same economic system. They become part of that neoliberal imperialism. So, do you really think this education system is worth it? We're talking about feeding people into the system, and then they become, as they grow up the ladder, they become oppressive in many ways. They become part of the system that is oppressive. I'm not saying they become inherently. And also, I would say the values it inculcates, like from class one, we're taught we have to give the first prize, the competition is the best place. And so, what do you really think that this education system that we have is the right education system, or is it just a feeding ground for the capitalism? We have seen in Finland they are focusing on community type of education. So what are your opinion about it?
So I have a very balanced answer to that because I feel that there are not black and whites, and also I would not like to go at a very higher level to connect the education system with types of economic systems because I think that's important. But I think that that's a stretch too far, and I would take too long, maybe 4 hours of talking. So I wouldn't take that leap to make that extrapolation.
Yeah.
What I would talk about is that I agree with you in a certain sense. Because I see it happening all the time. It's not only within our education system at any level you see, and this becomes more apparent when you were talking about LUMS. We all went to LUMS, but not only LUMS. Go to any university. I have worked in public universities. I worked with very smart students there, and there's this races there happening too. In public universities too, in private universities, and also throughout schools. You're talking about kiska first prize aayega, kiska second aayega, kiska third aayega. That was basically what was taught to us when we were growing up, and it becomes more clear. And I think it struck me at a very personal level. It struck me when I went for my master's to a university. I think you already introduced me to people know where I went, but in America, and I realized that although there was a competition there too, but for some reason I don't know, we were still graded. There were still marks, but I felt that there was with spirit of inquiry जो होती है ना, that was still preserved. I felt during my time here in university that spirit of inquiry, of research, of that pursuit of knowledge had totally died down. I think it dies down to a certain extent the moment you bring in competition and so forth amongst people, and they're just looking at grades and so forth. But it should not be to an extent that it totally goes away to a point that you will see any remnants of it. And when I went to those universities, and I think what also matters is people go to university, this thinking of going to university or going to school to learn to pass an exam and do well on that exam. That's a very big issue, and I will be whereas I personally know a lot of people used to go in university and also when I was in Pakistan, go to the library and they would study for the exam, their course notes, and nobody would look at those books that were in the library. Whereas when I was doing my university in the US, people actually read books that were relevant to their field, but not directly relevant to what's going to be tested on Sunday or on Monday, whatever date. So that spirit of inquiry needs to be preserved. अगर वो जारी and this is something I felt. I think maybe it's a cultural issue too. एक तो आप कह रहे हो ना कि सारी चीज के खत्म कर लें, grades हो ही ना, testing हो ही ना. I won't go that far. But I have seen this happen, this toxic kism ki competition happening similarly. And I don't know, somebody needs to answer this question for me, culturally speaking, in South Asian communities in the West too. I see in the West these kids who are either Indian, Pakistani, Bengali, they are following the same way. Maybe there's a cultural thing element to this. कि किस तरह वो super competitive हो जाते हैं.
Chinese also have.
Chinese, and yeah, so this is a cultural element to it. So we also have to explore the cultural element to why this hyper competitiveness. कि आपने किसी के साथ कुछ शेयर ही नहीं करना, छुप के अपने नोट्स खुद बनाने हैं और आपने देखना है कि आपका कितना आया है, क्लास का मीन क्या है, स्टैंडर्ड डिव क्या है, ऑल दोस थिंग्स, मेरा ग्रेड क्या आएगा, उसको मैं नहीं बताना, इसको नहीं बताना. So वो collaboration, spirit of collaboration also goes away. It's the greatest, some of the greatest works in the world when it comes to academia and research have been done collaboratively. They are not done by people in their silos. So yeah, that's my not so specific answer to your question.
Yeah.
A very specific question. But yeah, I don't think so. You can take away grading. I think that's important. But I think we need to tone down on importance of grading when it comes to that should not be the sole criteria.
Wonderful. I understand your point, maybe. But yeah, if I look at the education system from a macroeconomic perspective, I find it, a cog in the system. But that is another topic, and I agree with that. Um, my next question is about disparity. And if we look at, the role of education in creating disparity, I personally think maybe some people might disagree with me, but I feel there's a class apartheid in Pakistan, and education system is primary reason for it. So if you are rich, you go to certain schools and universities, and then that gives you access to certain institutions, and then the privilege just reproduces, and it starts from the English language, right?
Yeah. I think that's something that came to mind for me. I was like, I'm going to mention that because
Yeah.
that's linked to it. Yeah.
So the English language, right? So if you can, and English is something which is, I see so many smart people, and the only issue with them is their English. They cannot write, read, and speak English very properly, and that gives them lack of access to a lot of things. So, and language is not a metric of intelligence or hard work or anything. So similarly, we also see disparity. So I think this language thing, this class thing, and especially again the macroeconomic perspective, we're talking about that privatization of education that has happened in 1980s. Before that, all the universities in Pakistan were public, and everybody went there, whether rich or poor. Now we have this like grades of universities, and so especially, so I think economic system, in my opinion, does have a link with that because privatization was after 1980s when neoliberal system erupted. So how do you think that disparity in Pakistan has increased, especially in terms of class, language, and even when we talk about provinces, because certain provinces which are poor have less access to education. So, especially the smaller provinces.
Mm.
So, how do you view the role of disparity in Pakistan in lack of access to education, the general disparity?
I think lack of access to might be difficult to gauge here, but when it comes to disparity
Hmm.
and economic disparity being caused by disparities in education within the education system in
Hmm.
Pakistan,
Hmm.
I agree with you fully on that, and I think you already pointed it out. Language is a big dimension, has a role to play in this, and that's one dimension that really
Hmm.
needs to be explored. And yeah, it's one of those things you have to see. But you said like about the private sector, how privatization of education. I was a little bit disagree with like to disagree with it because I feel there are even a lot of private schools who are catering to a population segments of population uh, that are belong to typically lower economic strata, and so those institutes are also private institutes.
Hmm.
So you can't just fully say that because of privatization of education, um, these disparities are being caused because most of the because obviously in the limelight you see Beacon, let's say sorry, I should not be mentioning names, but there's certain chains, right? There's certain chains they're doing really good work, but within their specific domain. But obviously, there are only certain class that can afford to go to those
Hmm.
schools. So that does perpetuate the thing. But I feel instead of privatization, it's linked with the medium of infrastructure.
Hmm.
Because privatization, there are a lot of schools that cater to lower middle class or like lower class when it comes to economically speaking. For the lack of better terms, I'm
But don't
going
you
to
think
use
that
right.
again, if they are catering for a lower income class, first you have these public education, which is good. If you go to any public school in Pakistan, it's huge grounds, and they have good infrastructure. Like I'm talking about the cities, really. So they have some access in that aspect. But private education, you're talking about the low income private education. What do they provide? They're just money minting.
I would
That's
disagree with you because I have seen during my practice, I would like somebody to point out that I'm wrong, but I've seen that
Mm.
many parents send their children to private schools, low cost private schools instead of public schools. So maybe the public schools also should look at themselves what they're doing. I know people who are teachers in public schools who are sending their children in low cost private schools जो आगे दूसरी जगह पे होगा खुद जो स्कूल में पढ़ाते हैं. So that's an issue. We don't talk about it. We can't blame things on privatization. Private sector क्यों आया? क्योंकि private sector की आने की वजह से उस segment के अंदर भी उसने का private sector public sector को खराब किया. Maybe पहले ही public sector जो इतना खराब था कि private sector को आना पड़ा फिर. So we also you have to also look at it that way. Why is that these same teachers? There's an incentive problem. Same teachers जो पढ़ा रहे हैं उनके अपने बच्चे प्राइवेट स्कूल में पढ़ते हैं जो बिल्कुल ये नहीं कह रहा कि वो हायर कैटेगरी फी कैटेगरी के स्कूल में पढ़ते हैं उसी के सिमिलर लेवल के स्कूल के अंदर जो है प्राइवेट स्कूल में पढ़ते हैं बिकॉज दे नो के दे दो स्कूल्स केयर अबाउट अ बेटर एबल टू केटर टू देयर किड्स नीड्स अगर अपने बच्चों को आप एक स्कूल में नहीं पढ़ा रहे उनको प्राइवेट में डाला हुआ तो आप दूसरे बच्चों के साथ क्या कर रहे हो गरीब के बच्चे के साथ क्या कर रहे हो तो दैट्स एन इशू वी डोंट टॉक अबाउट इट ये प्राइवेटाइजेशन पब्लिक की हम बात कर लेते हैं बट देयर इज it's just at the end of the day, people don't want to work, in certain sectors, and I'm really clear about it. खास तौर पे कितना आप आगे जा सकते हो अपने बच्चे को अपने स्कूल में अगर आप नहीं पढ़ा रहे हो तो आपने दूसरे के बच्चों के साथ क्या करना so that's I
Okay.
know
You're very
I get like
passionate about
not
it.
passionate but that's true so
Right. I personally think that, public sector institutions did deliver in the, like, we had a time in Pakistan
mm,
before 1980s where predominantly we had public sector institutions,
mm,
universities and schools.
yeah
And probably their generation did, we produced a lot of people from those schools. So I think that this is not a problem with public or private. It is probably, as you were saying, the world has evolved,
yeah
and there are certain things that the public sector institution needs to inculcate in their
okay.
culture, which I do agree. But I personally think that education is something which should not be expended by an average family. An average family should not spend a part of their income on education,
Mm,
and even if they are sending it to low cost private schools, they're putting a money in that, which I think, so that we have to, at the end of the day, in my opinion, make public sector in schools and universities
Yeah.
the best.
I
And
think
we,
I totally agree with you on
and
that.
and
Yeah.
that a lot of countries have it.
Mm.
A lot of countries in Europe, even in UK, I think are the one of the best institutions are still public sector institutions. So it can happen. It doesn't. Maybe it's not that public sector are inherently.
No, but I think we should talk about very, sorry for cutting you, for good things too. A lot of good things are happening within the public domain too. जो
Yeah.
उसने काम किया है तो you would say we can go into certain जो हमने experiments किए थे
हाँ.
कि पब्लिक स्कूल्स के अंदर किस तरह जो है आप ब्लेंडेड ई लर्निंग के सिस्टम्स लेके आ सकते हैं, स्टेम एजुकेशन को बेहतर किया जा सकते हैं, तो देयर इज लॉट ऑफ स्कोप हियर. क्योंकि देखिए पब्लिक सेक्टर में एक चीज होती है, प्राइवेट सेक्टर जो होता है ना वो प्रॉफिट मोटिव से इतना लिमिटेड भी होता है. They are limited on how to invest in strategies, new strategies, because they don't unless there is a profit motive there. Public sector के अंदर there is more room for you to try new things. So that is also a good thing, and things are happening within the public sector when it comes to developing new teaching strategies, new ways of. It's not just about provision of infrastructure is important, but also new ways of teaching, because the world, like you said, the world has evolved. अब तो बच्चा जो है उसको आप एक टैबलेट दे दें, that's better than most teachers. So ये चीज तो है हमें
Maybe you are discounting the emotional aspect. Like a lot of people are inspired by their teachers and their child.
Yeah, I know, but a lot of people are also traumatized by the teachers, I think. So yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think I understand your point of view, but I do think that I personally find the idea of education being a business extremely problematic. I can understand a not-for-profit education system. Like we have so many private institutions which are not-for-profit, right? We have this Teach for Pakistan. A lot of schools are working. I think there was a Haldunia Academy in Islamabad, used to be one of the best, by Dr. Iqbal Ahmed, very famous scholar. And even LUMS is a not-for-profit institution. Yeah. So I think at least education, if some education institutions are focusing on quality, they can at least make it a not-for-profit institution, so that nobody is making cross money out of it, total profit making. You can invest on the money you generate is then put out into it, right? So you can give higher salaries to the teachers, so that there is an incentive for better teaching outcomes, but at the same time all the profit is going back to the institution. Do you think that that is something which we can do, so that at least that cross profit making model is not in education and health? I feel even if it is privatized, it should be a not for profit privatization.
I think then my question to you would be: are you going to do that? Are you thinking about doing it structural changes लाने के, or you're talking about regulation?
Both, I would say. Both. In that sense, both I would say, because I believe in banning private sector education, and even I'm not saying make it government, make it autonomous, make it a not for profit under a board or something like that. So that incentive is also there, in that sense that teachers are given higher salaries, and according to their performance they get promoted. But at the same time, on the macro level, there is no profit making agenda. All the profit is coming back to the.
But my question to you is that the immediate सबसे अगर if you do something like that, but आप ये भी नहीं करते कि ban तो is a big thing. If you go and even say कि okay, there's certain amount of profit जो आप ले सकते हो, उसके ऊपर जो है आपको reinvest करना है. Something like that. It could be regulated.
Even at the top schools at Pakistan, the ones, I will not name them, but the old, very old schools, board schools in Pakistan, in Lahore, and all of them are not-for-profit education system.
I totally get that. But my question to you is like, the more, even let's say that you put a limit on the amount of profit they can make. That's conceivable regulation.
Who will be making profit out of it?
I'm like, you say to them कि you are for profit, but now you can make this percentage of profit max, उसके ऊपर आपने reinvest करना सारा. It's very easy to do that if they are registered ones. So,
but again, I think education is something you should never allow.
I know that, but मेरा question है कि चलो ban करना तो बहुत आगे बात है. मैं एक आपको उसकी एक alternative policy दे रहा था, middle policy. अब दोनों अगर ये चीजें करते हो, सबसे पहला जो है issue क्या आना है कि आपके जो 26 million out of school children है, ये सीधा आपके जो है ना 40 million के ऊपर चले आने, 45 million के ऊपर चले आने. So that's the First thing that's going to happen.
Why would that?
Because there are a lot of children who go to these schools, private schools.
No,
So आपके
we
40
we
million
we
45
will
million के ऊपर
by
आपके out of school ticket
regulation,
चले जाएंगे.
and I'm sure private
Overnight,
school
overnight.
association is now going to ban me, but we will just inherently by legislation make all of these schools that are private, especially the chain schools, the big schools.
Non-profit बना देंगे.
We'll make it not profit. The head of that, the owner of that
Yeah.
chain can become president of that and can get good
No, but
salary.
if अगर उसका वो था ही businessman था, उसको जब कोई profit नजर नहीं आएगा,
No, we'll give
वो
that.
अगले दिन ही अपना बंद करेगा और कहेगा बस that's it.
We'll give that person a good salary, a very good salary.
नहीं, yeah, this is like, I was like, you have to look at the technicality of it. The next day you make it basically you're saying कि ये सभी किस्म की nationalization या फिर कोई non-profitization हम करते हैं. अगले दिन he will wrap up and say भाई आप चला ले, मैं मुझसे नहीं चलता. And then the state would have to
We will
like
put a
run-
board. Then that's what we want.
Yeah, then you will have to run all these private schools. आपसे
Under
अपने
a board,
अपने
we-
public schools नहीं run किए जा रहे, आप सारे private schools भी run
Look,
करना चाहते हैं.
there are a lot of public sector, semi-government institutions in Pakistan
Yeah.
who are doing pretty well, who are known well in market. I don't want to name them, but you know what I'm talking about. They are run under a board.
Mhm.
So a board runs them,
Mhm.
and then under that administration works. So if this guy who runs this big private chain school suddenly runs away because he says now I don't have any incentive, we'll put a board over that. We are not saying nationalizing it completely.
पाकिस्तान के अंदर जो है ना 3,13,000 इंस्टीट्यूट्स हैं, उसके अंदर से जो है 43%, 43.8% जो है ना, मैं फिगर पढ़ रहा हूँ,
हाँ,
प्राइवेट है.
हाँ.
आप कह रहे हैं आप ओवरनाइट जो आपसे अपने पब्लिक स्कूल नहीं संभाला जा रहा है जो 56% है.
नहीं, practicality on the other side.
44% स्कूल्स जो है
I don't know.
उनको आप ओवरनाइट स्टेट के पास दे देंगे कि आप लोग बोर्ड पे चला लें. आप लोग उसे अपने स्कूल नहीं संभाले जा रहे हैं, आप 44% लोग स्कूल के साथ संभालेंगे. ये मेरा क्वेश्चन है बस. I know, I agree with you at a fundamental level, but it's just so far-fetched. I can't think of that ever happening.
But
Because
you do agree on
आपके
it
इतने-
on a
Yeah, I agree with you on a philosophical level, but it probably take 100 or 200 years for that to be fixed.
why? Just one big government regulation can just do
Yeah.
it in one whim.
And it will, your out of school number then will come to
Really, these schools, the
45
children in
million.
these schools are generally affluent, and they'll not suddenly drop out from the schools.
You
They're-
will be surprised how many of are these are low cost private schools.
Okay, let's not go there. That is what I was talking about. Chain
More
schools.
children
Chain
are
schools.
more children are in low cost private schools than the big chains that teach people to go to do O levels and IP. More by a factor of 10.
That I agree.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. Those schools. I'm talking about they're not going to get out of school.
Okay. So I think we need to just not narrow our focus. We can, we want to diss people who are burgers, go to these schools. So that is something I agree with you. But just not diss all private schools just because we're talking about these class disparities. I agree with you. I have never been a burger, but I have gone to school with
Really?
burgers. I have an aversion to burgers now. We can talk and diss them, but generally the private school sector on its whole, it has its issues, but there are way more people, more students who are non-burgers who are going to these schools.
I agree with you, but I think I just find it that small private schools are still not making that much money. We're talking about this huge mafia of systems.
Yeah.
Like that is what I'm talking about. The big school mafia.
I think I agree with you on that, and also they are linked to the same thing we talked about, the English medium. And the English medium रो भी जाए नहीं कि it's also about you scratch your back, my back, I scratch your back. The club बन जाता है. Oh, I went to this school, I went to this school, I went to this university. Oh, we went to LUMS together. So I totally agree with you on that. और उसमें सबसे बड़ी आप चीज़ ये तो देखें ना, then those same people go and populate your positions of power.
Yeah.
आप देखें कितने लोग हैं उन्हीं स्कूल से जो है,
Yeah.
partly because उनकी अंग्रेजी अगर अच्छी है, तो आप अपना जो है मेन एग्जाम जो है CSS का एग्जाम है, जो आपके ब्यूरोक्रेट्स बनाने हैं, आपने पॉलिसी मेकर्स बनाने हैं, आपके जो आपकी बेसिकली स्टेट मशीनरी पॉलिटिशियंस ज़्यादा आपकी डे टू डे बेसिस के ऊपर आपके ब्यूरोक्रेट्स चलाते हैं. कहीं पे हर जगह ये होता है. मुझे इसको हर जगह के ये सोच के मुझे वो एक बड़ा फेमस मेरा फेवरेट जो है मुझे शो याद आ जाता है. I think maybe in the 80s आपने कभी देखा हो, वो UK sometime in the UK, तो if you have seen Yes Minister, So, they
I think
bureaucrat.
you have a version, just a version for public sector that is coming out again, again.
So no, but the
Ah,
thing is like आप अपने एग्जाम उसी अंग्रेजी में लेते हैं ना इसके ऊपर अंग्रेजी में एग्जाम लेंगे तो वही लोग जिनकी अंग्रेजी अच्छी है उन स्कूल में बर्गर स्कूलों से आए हैं वही एग्जाम के अंदर अच्छा परफॉर्म करेंगे वही आपके स्टेट को पॉपुलेट कर लेंगे और फिर वही जो है और प्रिविलेजेस वगैरह देंगे तो वो एक वही जो आप
तो
कहते
आप एग्री
हैं
करें मेरे
सिस्टम
साथ.
परपेचुएट होता है आई एग्री विद यू ऑन
So
दैट
we should nationalize them.
यू
Big schools.
यार अगर आप उनको नेशनलाइज करते हैं तो आपको लो स्कूल प्राइवेट स्कूल भी नेशनलाइज करने
Why?
पड़ेंगे ना
What they're not creating that
they know,
cultural
but like
problem
this has
or
to be a policy.
political
Why you can't
economic problem.
selectively say, okay, I'm going to kill you, but not kill you?
No, but the big businesses that are, as you're saying, the small private schools, they might be just having
They're not small.
like
Don't want to take names again, you know, but there are big chains of low school policies. These are big chains. So on a total, they are making a lot of money. Lot of money. But
let's narrow it down
they
to
are
chain schools more than the schools that has more than 2 branches, and I think none of them, even if whatever segment of population they are catering is not the low cost. Chains are not catering to low
no,
cost.
no. I'm sorry to disagree with you. You're wrong here.
Okay.
There are chains that are catering to low income classes.
Really?
Yes. I again don't want to make names, and they're like I can think of 5 names on the top of my head.
Okay.
And these schools they're not about 2 schools. These chains have 20 schools in one. At times we even have 20-25 schools in one city.
Okay, we can devise a formula for that. Like, which one are we talking
It's
about?
going to be really complex. That's what I'm saying.
But you think of this happening in Pakistan?
Would not like this to happen in Pakistan
Why?
because these are very dangerous waters. You will have then 50 million children out of school.
Okay, so if it is only those schools,
I think the best thing is to fix your public system first and incentivize people rather than legislation. Incentivize people to themselves. Let the market decide.
Okay.
Now.
Okay, let's
themselves like get rid of those. Stop sending the children to private schools and send them to public schools.
let's talk about only the affluent schools. I highly doubt those children are going to get out of school. We can find a metric that this school is
No, but
high.
the thing is, like, if you are targeting affluent schools where burgers go, then you have to target. There has to be some criteria. You can't say that we're going to target you and not going to target the other private schools. The private school association too has all schools, not all private schools. So how are you going? So I fail to recognize. I get that. I have this aversion to burgers too, and these fancy schools and so forth. But if you're trying to legislation to regulate them, then you have to regulate all private schools.
Okay.
And then we're going into very, very tricky waters.
And what do you think, as a policy expert, do you think we should do? If I ask you simply 3-4 things as a policy expert, you are working in this industry for a long time, you know everything, you have worked at everywhere, you have worked even in IFIs and everything. What is your basically 4 or 5 concrete things you want to talk about which we should do immediately and in long term?
I think to improve the state of education system in
Yeah,
Pakistan.
of course. That's our topic. I remember.
Okay. So because we went into a few tangents, right?
Yeah.
I think the first thing we need to do is set up priorities, right?
Okay.
What are our priorities? Are we focusing on? But even before that, I think the first thing is very basic, and that's the lowest hanging fruit, which is not that easy. It's the lowest hanging fruit, but it's not that easy either. Come up with a better way of the issues there too with international comparability and so forth. Come with a better way of estimating the real out of school children in Pakistan. कितने बच्चे out of school हैं? अभी ये हमारी definition है कि we count people जो data हमारे पास है, those children who are in school. And जो बाकी overall population हम देखते हैं कितनी है age bracket के अंदर, and we minus that over the number of children that are enrolled from total population, and इससे कितने बच्चे out of school हैं. But the problem is that there are significant amount of children who are going to schools that we're not covering when we're recording our data. So the way the formula is set up, we are counting they are actually in school. और some kind of education को मिल रही है and we're counting them as out of school. तो पहले तो उसको ठीक करें ना, और फिर उसका spatial spread भी देखेंगे कहाँ पे है, spatial spread देखें उसका कहाँ पे है. These are basic things रिसर्च एनालिस्ट और जो गवर्नमेंट के और अदर भी बाकी रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट्स हैं, दे रियली नीड टू फोकस ऑन दिस, वो करें। बट आप टारगेट कर लेते हैं स्पेशली कि कहाँ पे हैं, कौन से पॉकेट्स हैं, देन यू कैन एड्रेस द इशू एंड देन यू कैन लिंक इट विद इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर। तो जहाँ पे सबसे पहले तो आप बलोचिस्तान के अंदर देखें खासतौर पे कि एक इतना बड़ा प्रोविंस, आपने ऐसे कहा था कि वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट प्रोविंस, स्मॉलर प्रोविंसेस in terms of land area, it's the biggest province. Obviously, population is the smallest. Fix the facilities there, so children from there can come to school. Third, I would say, look at how you can provide using existing schools. Provide, because there are primary schools in all province, all mostly all localities. Rural छोटे छोटे गाँव में भी जाओगे आपको मिल जाएंगे। उनको किस तरह यूज कर सकते हैं for higher levels of education, because that will increase the mobility, particularly when it comes to girls, and that will really help. Third, I would say, fourth, I would say, focus on aligning your teaching methodologies with the change that is sweeping us over already, which is कि हमें तो AI की बात ही नहीं करनी चाहिए अभी पाकिस्तान में, बट जो डिजिटल टेक्नोलॉजी है उसकी भी हमें जो है बात करनी चाहिए। हाउ टू चेंज दैट, किस तरह होता है कि आई हैव सीन दिस हैपन, बच्चे जो हैं वी नीड टू फर्स्ट प्रॉपर इसके ट्रायल्स करें कि कौन सी टेक्नोलॉजी क्लासरूम में बेस्ट काम करती है, और इज इट बेटर टू देन अदर फॉर्म्स ऑफ teaching methodologies, paper-based, board-based, and so forth. And incorporate those digital learning strategies and give them to our public students, public school-going students, at the same level as people in some private schools are getting. Same level जब आप करेंगे तो then we can have a level playing field. So this is the fourth thing. And the fifth thing I think is really important is for us to realize that education is a priority. And we have to ultimately, I know these are tricky waters, but we have to increase our spending on education as a whole. And that has short-term immediate benefits too, but in the long run there is a direct relationship with education spending. It's been like documented a zillion times. Education spending, and even like basic education spending, when it comes to just in terms of numbers, we're not talking about is किस्म की spending or किस्म spending, and long-term economic growth, human capital growth, and आपकी economic growth are just been proven time and again. So we need to increase the spending on education.
But when they did increase the spending, they made so many universities, and you are critical of that too, and I'm also critical of that. Why? What do you think?
I think there is, we're talking about basic right to education. We have to talk about, I personally, when you come to very specific, I think you specifically mentioned one thing. I am against having universities in every, one university in every district, because I feel if you just, because I've done work on this, I work on labor markets. I see children don't have kids, let's call them children, kids, not even kids. These are students, young people now. Young people, when they graduate from university, they don't have any choices. They don't have any jobs. Or even if they get jobs, they're underemployed.
So the education system, do you think then is not the problem? It is the economic system.
No, the education system is the problem, but it's the economic system. The old system works, but I was mentioning it because in relation to the universities and why I'm against that. I'm against that because you're giving these fancy university degrees to students when they are going to, I think bachelor's की डिग्री कहते हैं और काम उन्होंने वही करना होता है जो मैट्रिक का बंदा कर सकता है. So what's the point of having 4 साल की डिग्री करके एक बच्चे ने पैसे लगाए हैं और
So
वो
you
आता
are
है वही
totally
जो
focusing
मैट्रिक करके भी कर
on
सकता है.
school education.
Yeah, school education.
Or like basic education
Yeah.
till the intermediate.
Yeah.
University education, you think, is something that is.
I think it should be a luxury, and that is the case in the
West,
in the
yes.
West too. It's a luxury that is not afforded to most people, and because most people don't need it.
And there is no need for it.
Yeah.
Like if you, there are a lot of academic degrees that are good if you're very interested, but I think you can, as you're saying, you can easily do something which is which can make you money with a
Mhm.
diploma or something. So I
Yeah,
think we need
exactly.
to change the culture on it, the
Yeah.
stigma on
Sigma.
the.
I see these jobs for basic clerical positions and they say कि you need to have a minimum bachelor's degree.
Why?
वही ना तो मैं भी पूछता this is a question we need to ask ourselves. So why? When somebody who just has the intermediate can do it. तो
All
उसको
right.
जो है चार intermediate का 4 साल और
And you
लगाने
know, it is also bad for the economy because economy
हैं.
is then losing a lot of money in these very dead investments in education.
Yeah, I think
A lot of money is going abroad because of that, and also I think that the economy is then losing a productive years of a lot of population.
yeah, I think it's also a cultural thing, right? Our kids, these children, particularly from certain classes में बहुत बुरा मनाया जाता है कि अगर बच्चा जो है कोई ऐसा काम कर ले जिसको is not aligned
Would
with
your
their
father be fine if you haven't gone to university?
वही ना, probably not.
Yeah.
So these are cultural
Your
issues
family
too.
would have ostracized you.
Yeah, not ostracized me, but for instance, it would have been more difficult when I was growing up had I not had the experience of going to the US and then getting exposure. But early on, it would have been very difficult because this concept of like children now I think it's working of students while in university going and doing jobs. This is like commonplace in the West. But our students never do it unless it's absolutely necessary. And even when they do certain kinds of jobs, they would never very hardly unless बिल्कुल ही कोई भूखा जो है भूख पड़ जाए ना तो then they probably go and do something. But then nobody was just gonna get up and stand at McDonald's. At least the kind of class that
Why would
I
you
grew up with.
even want McDonald's in the first place in Pakistan?
So I don't know McDonald's, but it just could be any chain, right?
Yeah.
So I think you can't be a server or something. Those people do it, but we
Yeah.
don't do it. So
All right. Last question,
yeah.
and a very important question,
Mm.
and something you have worked a lot on. So I would appreciate a non-diplomatic answer. How do you view the role of the development sector and the World Bank and the IMF and the IFIs? Because all of them have supported so many projects, funded so many projects, and we don't see any results. So, do you find any positive role played by these international institutions, these, money coming from the West in creating a better environment for education?
I think it's important to realize that wherever proper change has come,
Hmm.
partly not only with regards to the education system, but education system is a big part of it. But when it comes to general social development and economic development, general development in countries, there are successful examples, recent ones, last 2 or 3 decades, you will look at recent examples. In all those instances,
Hmm.
there was local ownership
Hmm.
of reform.
Really?
Local ownership of reform, local initiative for reform,
Initiative
local
also.
will for reform,
A local design of the.
local desire,
That's
and local vision. तो अगर वो हमारे पास एक आ जाए, that's our only way out. International money can help, but our education policy and our will to reform needs to come endemically. And when it comes, I think I use the right word. Endemically is the right word, right?
Yeah.
It has come from within.
Yeah.
And once and only when that happens, we can grow.
So you think they have not done a very good job, or do you think that even
I think
trying
they are
to-
also limited in that sense because they have to work in a certain context. But I also have experience in monitoring and evaluation. So I give there's a rating scale to differences. You say they have not done well.
Hmm.
So there is a common
Do you
rating we
think
give
that-
in which case
Do you think the design of the
satisfactory
design of
yeah.
the development sector is such that it can't do anything because like it's very much dependent on the government to do actually.
Yeah.
And then also I think they're very as you're saying delocalized they're not into the game, so they don't
Yeah,
understand a
they
lot of
don't know the
things.
game, and also there is a huge quickly is emphasis because they don't have time, and many of
Yeah.
their metrics are look at multilateral, also bilateral. Their metric, one of the main metric is how much money was spent,
Yeah.
and so they want to. There is a preoccupation with just outputs, maybe the
It's very
outputs,
bureaucratic kind of
bureaucratic and
work.
measuring the outputs, like this much money was
Getting
invested.
your job
That's
done
it,
and
cutting
just
your
like
job done, getting out of there without looking at the outcomes. Because
uh,
they send, and their argument is, it's for you,
mm,
you people, because it's your countries, your children, your institutions, to make sure that those outcomes come. So I think उधर भी issue है कि और generally there it's not only that these outside organizations come, there are local people working in these organizations.
I think I had a wonderful conversation and
Right.
learned a lot from you. And thank you so much for coming. I think we had a tangent in the middle. We
Yeah.
went another way, but that's, I think, good for our podcast. It gives
Yeah.
you more indigenous kind of thinking. So I would definitely appreciate you coming to our podcast and talking to us. And I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you, Shazir. Thank you for having me. Thank you to IPRI and the team here. So thanks.
All right. Thank you.